Welcome, Barry Robbins, to Raw and Cooked Vegan.
Thanks, Paul.
Nice to have you.
Yeah, it's
So
great to be here.
Barry's YouTube channel is Barry's Vegan Life, and I'll put that in the bottom. I'll put exactly how you write that out in the bottom of the video here.
Okay.
But welcome, Barry. It's great to see you. And if you could just characterize for us briefly how you grew up and what your family's general orientation towards diet was, and perhaps fitness.
Okay. I mean, I grew up on, a standard American diet, as pretty much everyone else has. I was always pretty fit, and I was always thin, and I was always pretty active. I did do a lot of cycling in my 20s. Now I do mostly running, but I've always been pretty active. The way I got into do you want me to go into how I got into the whole vegan thing, or just dive right into it?
Well, that's totally cool. The only thing I would like to hear is, did your parents at all advocate a healthy diet? Was it kind of a sad diet? Was there any awareness of nutrition?
Very little. I mean, I think my father does have some leanings towards trying to eat a more healthy standard American diet, but in general, it's just not much awareness, particularly of like the benefits of fruits and vegetables. I mean, there wasn't a real concrete thought. I think most people have that idea in the back of their heads, but it's just very easy. There's so much temptation out there to just eat bad food. And that's what happened to me.
And would you guys eat like macaroni and cheese, hamburgers, and
definitely
steak
TV dinners, pot pies? There was something called Dinty Moore beef stew. I mean, those were the staples in my diet.
Right. Okay. So definitely tell me, at what age did you start to think, hey, maybe I've got to think about this a little bit?
Well, what happened with me? I was always pretty healthy throughout my life, but I'm 46 now. As I got into my 40s, I started to have issues with heart arrhythmias, and I went to the doctor at one point, and she did a cardiogram, and she came back with the graph of my heartbeat, and she pointed to these irregularities in my heartbeat. And I was relatively healthy at that point, and it was kind of shocking. I mean, obviously I was not eating the vegan diet, but it was kind of shocking that I'd be having heart problems. And at that point, she referred me to a cardiologist. I went to the cardiologist, and I said, what can I do to, correct my heart problems? And he laughed, and he said, there's basically nothing you can do. And I said, well, what about, I was drinking coffee at the time. I'm like, well, what if I stopped drinking coffee? And I still remember he laughed. He said, that won't make any difference. You're pretty much stuck. And that just didn't really seem right to me. It didn't seem right to me that I would just be living my life, and then suddenly I'd have, heart, arrhythmia issues, and it had nothing to do with anything else that I was doing in my life.
Yeah, and how old were you, Barry, when you had this?
That was around 43 or 44.
So this is recent. This is like 3 years ago, or?
Yeah. Well, I'm 45 now, so I'd say this is probably around 42, so about 3 years ago.
This is the kind of thing that kind of riles me up. A medical doctor who's getting paid to tell you there's nothing you can do. 3 years ago, he should have known better. But anyway, go ahead.
Yeah, and I don't want to, I can't get into his mind, and I can't understand what his thinking was, or, how good a cardiologist he is. I think doctors, in general, I have a negative opinion of doctors, but I do want to give them the benefit of the doubt. And I think maybe they might get discouraged with people. I think a lot of times, they want to tell people, you need to live a better lifestyle. And it's very hard for most people. I mean, most people have a vague general idea that eating more fruits and vegetables is good for them. I mean, this isn't rocket science. This is really
Yeah.
simple.
Yeah.
But most people don't do anything about it,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know? So, so I left that interview and I mean, I left that appointment with the cardiologist, and fortunately, something very beneficial happened for me. And I kind of think of it almost as an awakening because what happened was I saw the movie Forks Over Knives.
Yeah.
And not only, it's kind of two things happened. I saw the movie and I saw it at the right time where I was really ready for the message that that movie was putting out there. Because even before I saw Forks Over Knives, I had seen this documentary called Farm Inc., which
Yes.
basically tells you everything you need to know about how terrible farm animals are treated.
Yeah.
And I was very sympathetic to the movie. I mean, it really affected me, but I still did nothing about it.
Yeah.
Okay, like I wasn't really ready to receive that message. Okay, but fortunately, when I saw Forks Over Knives, I was ready. And from the time I saw that documentary, and I'm not sure if you're familiar with it, but it's basically a documentary about T. Colin Campbell and Caldwell Esselstyn and their whole
Yes.
view of the benefits of the vegan diet.
Yes.
So I saw that movie, and it just immediately changed me. I have never eaten meat since since I saw that movie, and I just immediately changed my diet after that.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah.
All right. Now, so the interesting thing is, so you've been doing this for like 3 years. Now, you said you eliminated meat. Did you also eliminate dairy and eggs?
Yeah. So when I first watched the movie, I said, all meat and dairy is out. Now, at that point, I was a coffee drinker, and I think I might have had dairy a little bit after that, but I pretty quickly switched over to like a vegan, like soy milk kind of dairy creamer.
Right.
And then a little bit, maybe a month or two after that, I stopped drinking coffee altogether. So, pretty much right from the beginning, I was, totally eliminating animal products.
All right. Now, the interesting thing with you is you didn't have any personally observable problems. It's just that when you went to the doctor, they said, hey, something's going on with your heart.
There were other issues that I had. I think when men get into their 40s, I think a lot of men start waking up in the middle of the night, extremely hot, and
Huh.
that has started to happen to me. And there were other things, just a general feeling that I was aging. I work as a computer programmer, and at the time, I started feeling like my memory wasn't as sharp, and just in general, a deterioration, the slow progression, the slow
Yeah.
deterioration of your health that happens when you're on, an acidic diet, which is really what the standard American diet is. It's acidic,
Yeah.
and it gives you inflammation. And this is the issue that I think a lot of people out there are dealing with is this slow deterioration because their body is so acidic.
Yeah, that's a great point, Barry. And it's since they're introduced to it at such as in infancy, they think it's normal. It's kind of there constantly until they have a heart attack.
Yeah.
So it's a great point. Now, did you notice after you made this change, what were some of the health benefits that you experienced?
Well, there's just so many. The immediate thing that happened to me was I'm about 6 feet tall, and at the time I weighed 155, 150, somewhere around there. I immediately lost 20 pounds.
Wow.
I went down to 130. I'm 130 now, and I do run a lot. I probably should be, you know, eating a lot more calories. But I've been 130 for a couple of years now, and most people think I'm very skinny. For me, it's pretty comfortable. Um, I wouldn't want to be more than 140, but I think 135 is probably a good weight. Especially as I run a lot. Um,
I can totally relate. Yeah, I'm 5'11", 145, and people always say how thin I am, so But
Yeah, it's tough because, for the standard American diet, what's natural, it's much, it's a whole new reality of what's average or what's normal. And
yeah,
the
yeah,
easiest way to see this is if you ever come across like some video footage from the 1960s and 1970s and see like a movie or something, everyone's really thin in those movies. The average person is very thin, right?
that's interesting. Yeah,
And you look at movies now or television now, just the average weight of someone, it's changed.
yeah,
Um, so I'm sure, regardless, I am thin, but I am pretty strict about my diet now. I am eating, mostly a raw. The whole year now, I've been eating predominantly a raw diet. So.
wow. Okay. So when you first transitioned, were you doing a cooked vegan?
Yeah, so I ate, it takes a long time. And one of the points I wanted to mention, working at your perfecting your diet, it's very hard to say from day one. And some people have done it, but from day one, say I'm going to eat the perfect raw vegan diet.
Right.
I'm going to practice all the best practices for health and wellness. It's very hard to do that. Everyone has a routine to their life, and they have habits and practices. And for me, I did from day one, I stopped eating meat and dairy. Um, but at that point, I didn't even know what to eat. All I knew is I didn't want to have meat in my meal. So I basically just had the same meals without the meat. And before I actually went vegan, I was never much of a consuming dairy, and so I didn't like to eat cheese, and I did not eat that much dairy. Um, but when I switched over to being vegan, it was just the same meals I was eating before minus the meat. And it
Okay.
took, so it was mostly cooked, a lot of cooked starches, a lot of cooked grains, and I slowly replaced. I basically took the habits out that didn't
Hang.
fit me. So I think I lost. So for me, it was always, you know, when I first switched to the vegan diet, I had all these habits from before this transition. And for me, it was always this slow process of saying, you know what, this is the worst habit. This is the worst habit for my health that I still have. And let me work on that. Or, breakfast is not a really healthy meal for me right now. Let me try and change breakfast. And slowly, it was over, a period of a couple years, it was just this process of replacing habits that really aren't good with better habits and just trying to improve my overall lifestyle, one
I
little
love
thing
that.
at a time.
I love what you're suggesting there, Barry. It's a very logical, systematic, practical, even paced transition. I like that.
Yeah. And yeah, and for me, that's just the easiest way to do it. I mean, like, for example, I made a video about this, about how I quit drinking coffee. Uh, and I also, when I was much younger, I quit smoking the same way. Um, what I did is just, I went from a certain amount of coffee. At the time, I was drinking 2 cups a day, and tried to quit cold turkey, and I had, stabbing migraine headaches. It was just a nightmare. And I said, this isn't going to work. So I had to go back to drinking coffee. But after that first experience, it was just going from 2 cups of coffee to 1.5 cups of coffee, till eventually I got down to one small cup of coffee. And then I got to the point when I quit drinking coffee, I literally poured like one gulpful of coffee into a cup and drank that in the morning. I said, all right, at this point, I think I can quit drinking coffee. And that's actually how I quit without having any migraines. And I have never considered having another cup.
That's brilliant. That's brilliant, Barry. I love that. Very very simple, and yeah, you avoid
Yeah,
the detox.
yeah,
Um, that's great. So I guess you stopped having any of the uh, negative consequences of drinking coffee, which is
right.
you can be kind of tense, hyper. Um,
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
and then it sounds like you kind of gradually move from cooked vegan to raw vegan. Would you say that from the start it was pretty much a low-fat approach?
Definitely. And, like so many people, I was definitely influenced by Durian Ryder, Dan McDonald, The Life Regenerator. The
Yep.
time I liked someone, the Raw Food Family, which is Sundance.
Yep.
And there's so many great. The great thing about YouTube is there's just so many great people out there, just talking about their experiences. So I would watch these people, and slowly it dawned on me that if you're going to be successful as a vegan, you probably want to eat as much fruit as possible. And so I just started eating all fruit for breakfast. I kept my lunch and my dinner, vegan, but basically the way I was going before.
Right.
And at first I wasn't really eating that much and I was really hungry, but slowly I just got into the routine where a bigger and bigger portion of my day I spent eating fruit, right? Until eventually, Freely had this raw till 4 thing, and at that point I was already doing that, and I said, well, great, I'm already living a good lifestyle.
Yeah, yeah.
And at that point I would eat cooked grains, a lot of beans, lentils, split pea for dinner.
Okay.
And that's pretty good. But there's still problems with that, and I know Durian Ryder and Freely are promoting this kind of cooked grain raw till 4 as a backup plan for a lot of people. It's much more practical than eating fruit all day, which can be very expensive. But for me, especially after reflecting on some of the points from the 80-10-10 book by Douglas Graham, eating grains is not a health promoting activity. They can seem pretty benign, and it's very convenient to have the fruit throughout the day and then round out your calories with a starch-based dinner.
Right.
And for most people, I mean, if you want to have a reasonable amount of health, I think you can do that, and that'll work for most people. But for me, I just found a lot of negative aspects to that. I think cooked grains they're not great for your digestive system. And, Dr. Graham in 80-10-10 talks about how fragile and how soft and vulnerable the lining of your digestive tract is, and how cooked starches are generally harsh and abrasive to that lining. And anything abrasive to the digestive tract lining is going to cause like mucus to be formed on the lining of the digestive system. And subsequent to that, you have this lining of mucus in your digestive system to help you digest cooked starches. Well, the follow-up effect of that is that your absorption is diminished. And kind of the holy grail idea of a lot of raw food thinkers is that by eating 100% raw, you're going to have the best possible absorption that you can have. And any kind of deviation away from the fully, a fruit-based 100% raw diet is going to diminish your absorption. You're going to end up, the lining of your digestive tract is going to have more mucus to help digest these non-optimal food meals that you're having. And it's going to reduce your absorption and just the overall efficiency of your digestive process. And I really believe that. I mean, just saying it, my initial response would have been, well, you have to prove all that to me. But just from my experience, my digestion is much better when I eat a fully raw diet. My bowel movements when I'm eating cooked starches, it's much more difficult. And I personally had problems. Whenever I ate cooked grains, I had problems with blood in my stool. I don't want to be too graphic here, but I always had that problem.
Well, that's interesting. I interviewed Mike Velocity, and he had the same problem.
Yeah. So. And for me, it was like The day I switched over to eating a fully raw diet, that stopped. And
Wow.
I've had a lot of problems with blood in my stool. And I've had that problem when I was raw till 4, and after 4, just eating cooked grains, I was still having that problem.
Did
And just
you?
eating, living a very healthy lifestyle. I mean, no alcohol, no coffee, really
Had
nothing detracting from my health,
had you
except
ever
for the cooked dinner.
had you ever had that problem prior to going vegan?
Yeah, that was a problem I always had.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I think it's an excellent point you're making. I've intuitively felt that that what Doug Graham's saying in 80-10-10 is true. It makes sense to me in terms of fiber, water content, nutrient content of the foods. There's
Yeah.
a lot of reasons it makes sense to me. However, considering the preponderance of Americans still being focused on an animal product-based diet, I see a starch-based vegan diet as the optimal transition medium for most of them.
Yeah. I mean,
But but
it, go
let
ahead.
me ask you, do you can you tell us a little bit about you're a great example because you spend a good bit of time on a cooked vegan and then you transition to raw. So can
Right.
you tell us a little bit about benefits you experienced going from sad to cooked vegan and benefits you experienced going from cooked vegan to raw?
Well, I mean, the initial thing that comes to mind switching over to just a cooked vegan is you will get sick much less. I was just always having colds. I always had issues with seasonal allergies when I was on the standard American diet. And switching into my first initial attempts at the vegan diet, automatically you're going to have much less disease, much less colds, much less allergy. I feel people with asthma problems, much less asthma. Um, when when I had the problems with heart arrhythmias, one thing that went along with that was this, and kind of the reason I was not surprised when the doctor said I had heart arrhythmia issues was I had this problem where I was like always having to take like a yawn. Like I always felt a little short of breath.
Huh.
I could be sitting there, and if I didn't have the problem, if I just thought about it, I would suddenly have to yawn and take a really deep breath and kind of just stretch my chest out. And I still to this day don't really know what that was, but I know I don't have that problem anymore.
I think that's dairy. I think that's dairy maybe. Yeah.
Yeah. And that I had periods where I would be doing that for like a month straight, all day, and that's
Wow.
disturbing. Uh, it's actually very tiring too. Like, yawning over and over again for a whole day, you end up kind of stretching it
Yeah.
affects your chest after a while.
That's weird. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
You know?
Yeah, I hear you. Yeah.
So, I mean, the easiest thing you can say about the standard American diet switching, the initial switch to the vegan diet is your quality of life is just going to be so dramatically better. I don't know how to put this to people, and it's kind of, I'm so shocked there are so few people following this diet. I mean, there's only like 1% of all Americans doing this diet. It's unbelievable.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
it's hard to, I don't understand it.
I know. You know, and you know, you gotta hand it to folks who've been in this fight for like 30, 40 years. I mean, they're some poor souls. They've known this truth for a long time, and they've been doing an uphill battle. And so my hat's off to them, and it can be frustrating. But I think, folks like yourself, intelligent people are starting to recognize it's kind of a no-brainer on so many fronts. Um,
Well, I think one thing that has changed is I think people are now more aware that when you eat a standard American diet, when you eat meat, your lifestyle is really damaging to the planet in general. And I mean, one simple statistic is the amount of energy that it takes to feed a vegan, to produce the food that a vegan is going to consume for an entire year. The amount of energy that is going to take to produce that food will only feed someone who eats meat for 1 month. So a meat eater's diet is 12 times energy more intensive than a vegan's. And it's
Yeah.
really simple to understand. It just takes an incredible amount of energy to raise a pig. You know, it's
Yes.
just, and it's unfortunately it's devastating to our environment. And I think people are starting to realize this. I think like eventually it's like this balance where things are finally tipping, where the average person is realizing, hopefully the average person will soon realize that their lifestyle is damaging to the planet. And people talk a lot about, oh, they're clearing out the rainforest in Brazil, and maybe people think they're building suburbs down there, or they're building soccer stadiums or something. There's really only one reason why they're clearing out those forests. It's for cattle ranching.
Yep. Yep.
That's the reason, to raise more cattle, because
Yep.
more people in the world want to eat, a hamburger.
Yeah.
And I think when people realize that, when environmentally conscious people realize that, I think those people, there's a lot more people concerned about global warming than there are vegans. And I think when those people realize how damaging their lifestyle is, particularly the fact, eating meat, that particular fact, how damaging that is, I think hopefully those people will switch over to becoming vegan as well.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I've noticed. I don't know if you're familiar with the publication Mother Jones. They got a website, and they now regularly have articles. I mean, their top articles frequently reference the animal, production industry, because it's intimately tied in with the environment. You can't separate it.
Yeah.
So I think it's a great point you're making, and I think there's this amazing disconnect, which I myself had been guilty of not knowing what's going on behind the products that I was buying.
Yeah.
So you go in and you buy this meat, and you don't really know what's involved in producing it.
Right. And I will say, I mean, we're here on YouTube. YouTube is a fantastic communication platform for vegans. I mean, I was amazed how easy it was to tap into so many channels.
Yeah.
And, I mean, vegans have a big presence on YouTube.
Yeah.
And, when you go out into, if you turn on the television, you will never, ever, ever get the vegan message. Ever. It is nowhere to be found on cable television. Just because my basic view is, being vegan, you are just independent. You are not as dependent on other people as you are with the standard American diet. With the standard American diet, your life will eventually lead you into dependence on the American healthcare system. It's inevitable. It's inevitable.
Yeah, this is huge. This is so
dependent.
huge. And with this discussion of healthcare and the prevention, the healthcare will not bankrupt the United States if people simply change their diets.
Exactly.
And the amount of suffering that could be prevented. People don't have to be having triple bypasses. They don't. There's no reason for it.
No, I mean it's really. I mean that's the thing where I just want to smash my head into the wall. I don't understand. I don't know if you're familiar with nutritionfacts.org.
Yes.
Dr. Michael Krieger. He's got a great channel on YouTube. He's gone through all of the major diseases in this country are caused by diet.
That's right.
All of them.
Yes.
And a lot of people, I grew up, a lot of people in my family had, my grandmother had Alzheimer's, and there was always this, she died of Alzheimer's basically, and there was always this understanding that, oh, well, Alzheimer's runs in our family, so, that's what's going to happen to us. And, I think that's kind of like there's this widespread attitude out there of, oh, my mother had breast cancer, that's what's going to happen to me, or my father had a heart attack, and, it's just in our genes.
Yeah, yeah,
That's
yeah.
total garbage. That is ridiculous.
This is an amazing thing. This genetic uh, theory that is so promoted within the media, they assign so much importance to genetics, but it's really what you put in your mouth. It's what you put in your mouth and whether you're exercising or not. Those factors are so much more important in determining whether you're healthy than your genetics.
Yeah.
It's amazing. It comes down, I think, a lot to psychology, and people are just, they have habits, they have sentimental reasons for staying with these habits. They have something that you referred to, which it's really insidious, is this the industrial complex that is involved in perpetuating this problem. The industrial complex, the industrial food complex, selling, marketing products that are killing people, and then the pharmaceutical industry taking it up on the back end. It's really insidious.
Yeah, and it's very so people have become just hooked into that. People have lost a lot of independence, and really one of the most beautiful things about the vegan diet is you get back a lot of your independence. I personally, I mean, I have health insurance now through my job. I honestly don't think I need health insurance,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
I don't really ever go to the doctor. I don't foresee any reason to go to the doctor other than, I mean, God forbid, any kind of acute injury, if I get into a car accident or,
Right.
you know, something like that, then doctors are great. I mean, if you break a bone, if you get in a car accident, the doctors will save your life, hopefully.
Yeah.
But if you have a problem where you're not eating the right food, a doctor cannot help you. He can't give you some magic pill that's going to make the food that you're eating suddenly good for you. It's not going to ever happen. And
It's a great point, Barry. Now, let me go back a little bit and see, like, I totally agree with your point in general that when you shift from SAD to vegan, you're not really gonna experience illness. For you personally, before you went raw, what was your personal history like? What were some of the things that improved? Probably elimination. Now, you said grains gave you some digestive issues. Were those digestive issues worse than the SAD diet? Better?
no, so I mean everything got better when I switched off of the meat and dairy based diet. Um, Obviously, your digestion is so much better once you go to a vegan diet.
Right.
I mean, it's like the idea. I mean, your body was designed to digest fruit, okay, and certain other things. Cooked grains are easier to digest too. But the idea of digesting a steak, I mean, it's the amount of energy that you have to put into digesting that. It's unbelievable. I mean, it's like trying to digest a brick. It's
Yes.
impossible.
Yes.
I mean, so yeah, going to the vegan diet, digestion was much better, and it's just that much easier on a raw food diet. One thing I'll share with you, I saw. I'm sorry for getting graphic about this stuff, but if you're talking about digestion, it's going to get a little bit dirty.
That's okay. That's okay.
So I saw this video one time of Dr. Graham, and he was talking about digestion on an 80-10-10, fully raw diet.
Yeah.
And he said, your poop will not stink when you are on fully raw 80-10-10 diet. And when I heard him say this, I thought, this guy is totally nuts. He's like, I mean, his shit doesn't stink. I mean, he's totally crazy. He's a total nut. And I did not believe him at all. I really literally thought he was crazy. But I can tell you, it's true. It really is true. So I don't know.
I love it. I
That's
love it.
probably enough said.
All right. When so many things I want to ask you, but can you tell me you were a runner while you were doing SAD, you were a runner on cooked vegan and a runner on raw vegan. How did these various diets affect your performance?
um, I think definitely. Well, before so let me figure out how to say this here. Before I switched to the vegan diet, I was running, but I was having a lot of injuries. I wasn't really running with the proper form, and kind of a lot of things all came together for me at the same time. I switched my diet. I actually changed the way I run. Now I run on something called like a midfoot strike instead of a heel strike. When I was
Okay.
doing heel striking, I was having a lot of foot and ankle and knee problems. And I
Uh-huh.
switched over to doing midfoot running, which is the way you're supposed to run long distance. And so I immediately was able to start training a lot more. And I'm not sure. I think a lot of it was my diet.
Gotcha. Gotcha.
A lot of it was changing my form. But I immediately started running way more than I ever ran before in my life. And just the more and more I switched over to a fruit-based diet, um, people on like a standard American diet, they really think of exercise as a burden. Like it's like, oh my God, I don't like exercising, or I can't exercise, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But once you eat a fruit-based diet, you literally have to exercise because you have so much energy. You're not just gonna like be eating fruit all day and not do anything. It's just very natural to want to do some kind of athletic endeavor. And
You
for me,
know,
running was always great.
that totally amplifies what Durian Rider says. You got to get enough carbohydrates in there, and then you are going to want to exercise.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's not a burden. It's just the natural thing to do.
yeah, that's a great point. Um, can you say a little bit about now what you do eat? Like, so you're doing pretty much a raw food diet. Can you describe like what a typical day is for you? You have a fruit breakfast, fruit lunch, a salad for dinner. How's it go?
Yeah, so I guess a couple of things here. I live in New Jersey, and it's winter in New Jersey now, and it's very difficult to get decent fruit in the winter. It's much easier during the summer when we have a lot of fantastic fruit here in New Jersey. But now I'll eat predominantly. I'll eat a lot of bananas. I eat a lot of dates, a lot of berries. But the key thing that has been beneficial for me is like the key new habit that I've introduced is I just eat a lot of salads and I have like a fruit-based dressing. So I'll blend up dates and strawberries or dates and blueberries, and I'll have any kind of a green salad with that. And that really makes the whole thing work because if you start eating all fruit, and I love eating fruit, but you will OD on sweetness. You'll get to the point where I can't eat another pineapple or mango or banana, and you need a little bit of variety of taste. And for me, it's been very easy to, at that point, just eat a salad. And even if it's a salad with a, kind of like a strawberry dressing, it's still like greens give you a different sensation and kind of help you refocus. Particularly at the end of the day, you don't want to eat a pineapple at the end of the day. So,
I think you're making a huge point, and it's something that Andrew Perlot had said. He's got a little recipe book on dressings, and he said, it's hard for me to eat enough greens, and I need to do exactly what you've done because if you do a dressing like that, you're going to eat them.
yeah.
I know some people just eat a romaine head straight, and I do that sometimes, but if you got a dressing like you're talking about, you're going to be much more likely to eat them.
Well, if I could say, I'm eating a head of romaine every single day.
Yeah.
um, but you got to eat a lot
Romaine's
of
not
greens.
bad. Romaine's not bad. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you got to eat a lot of greens, and like a fruit-based dressing is a good way to do it.
Yeah. So do you have any idea about how many calories you do eat per day?
Um, I'm thinking at most I'm eating around 2,000.
Okay. Wow.
I
Okay.
probably could eat. I know I need to eat more. Um, but I'll share if I could share one story with you about that.
Yeah.
Maybe get your feedback on this. Um, so I'm thin and I don't want to lose any more weight. Okay, I don't want to lose any more weight,
Right.
and I do run a lot, and so I do have calorie demands that my body has. And when I started eating all raw, I was noticing that at the end of the day, I would kind of go to sleep and I'd be hungry. And I thought that's probably not good because I don't want to lose any more weight. Um, but an odd thing happened was I was waking up in the morning and I'm thinking, wow, I was hungry last night. I must have lost a half a pound or a pound, or I'm probably losing more weight. But I haven't. I actually have not lost any weight, but I am going to sleep hungry sometimes.
Yeah.
And um, I don't know if you've ever heard of Lauren Lockman. He has this Tanglewood Wellness Center. He's got a pretty good channel on YouTube, and he kind of makes this point of, you know, most people don't really know what hunger is like. And he says that when you're hungry, it's really something that you feel in your throat.
Yes. Yeah.
And when your stomach is hurting, it's not necessarily hunger. It's just that your stomach has digested all the food that you put in it, and it's now kind of starting some detox process.
Mm.
And I kind of am, I'm kind of torn on this. On the one hand, I really don't think your stomach should ever be hurting, but you, I'm not convinced that people need as many calories as they think. And I know Durian Ryder talks a lot about, eating 30 bananas a day or blending up 20 bananas in one sitting. But he also bike rides thousands and thousands of miles a year. And I run a decent amount, maybe 20 miles a week. I don't run thousands of miles. And I'm not convinced that I need as many calories as he does. I think I need more calories, but not as many as he does. I don't think 30 bananas in a day, 3,000 calories. I don't think I need that much.
Well, it's a huge topic. It's a very huge topic. A lot of recommendations do say that 3,000 calories for a male is about average. And
Right.
that's, Durian Ryder exceeds that. I think sometimes he'll eat 5,000 or 6,000 calories.
Yeah.
So, and I think for a guy your size, you said you're 6 foot,
Yeah.
my guess would be 2,000 is a bit low.
Yeah.
However, uh, I like the idea of listening to your body, and if you're satisfied, you're satisfied. Are you saying that this hunger sensation you have when you go to sleep is a kind of gnawing in the stomach, or is it a dryness in the throat, or what kind of hunger is it?
Well, it's like in your stomach. I mean, for you to have hunger, Lauren Lockman's point is everyone has a lot of reserves on their body in the form
Yeah.
of fat. Okay. And to feel, you've got to really starve yourself for a long time to feel hunger in your throat. Most people have never felt that. Okay.
Yeah.
Very few Americans have ever felt hunger
Yeah.
in the
Yeah.
throat. Okay.
Right.
Because you've got to
It's more
drain
like
away all the reserves that you have on your body. And so he's saying what people feel in their stomach is just the process of detoxification, or your stomach has fully digested the food that was there. So
I think one complicating factor is that for so long we've eaten highly concentrated foods, and we became
yeah,
accustomed to eating them. And I think now you must have already gone through this transition, but apparently there's a transition that occurs as you eat more and more raw food, that there's quite a bit more bulk in the stomach, and so the stomach has to kind of expand to be able to accommodate that, which it's capable of doing.
yeah,
But it takes some time for the stomach to do that, and that may affect somewhat the sense of fullness and satiation. Uh, So
Yep.
I don't know. I would imagine it sounds like you've been doing raw long enough that that should have already occurred for you. But just as my intuition says, 2,000 for a 6 foot guy that's running, I would say 2,000 calories is a bit low.
Yeah, it's
But
probably low. It's probably
but
low.
I mean, it's kind of a personal thing, you know. I don't know.
Well, see, in the back of my mind, I'm also, I mean, Durian Ryder would hate this comment, but I am still thinking like calorie restriction is important, you know,
Well,
um, because I mean, look, they've done studies that say, you take a mouse and give it, 50% less calories, it's going to live twice as long.
yeah.
And I think there's something, I think there's something there.
Yeah,
And
you know, I just got a book out of the library, Dr. Furman's Eat to Live,
yeah,
and he makes that point. There's a lot of studies that refer to that. Now, one thing I was wondering when I read that is what is the diet that these mice are eating that's being restricted? Is it a natural diet for them? Because if you're on a SAD diet and you do a fast, that's a greatly healing thing, and so, I mean, if you were to reduce an unhealthy diet, it's going to have beneficial effects. You know what I'm saying?
yeah.
I don't know if they're feeding them their natural diet or not, but uh,
Yeah, I don't know either. I mean, I read the Dr. Furman book, and that's a great book. And he does talk about calorie restriction, and he also approaches the whole problem of, what you really want to do is maximize your phytonutrients and, all the magical things that are in fruits and vegetables. You want to get as much of those as possible.
right.
And at the same time, trying to minimize, not overdoing it on the calories, avoiding calorie-rich foods.
You know, one of the things you're making me think. How much do you run?
I run I usually run 5 miles, 4 or 5 times a week. So usually 20, 25 miles a week.
Okay. One of the things I like about Durian Ryder's position is that it addresses head on the problem found with most every other diet, which is people are told to restrict calories and then they can't stay on the diet because first of all, they're eating foods that are unhealthy. If you have an animal product based diet and you restrict calories on that, you're never going to be satiated. And
Yeah.
that's why there's this huge endemic problem, you know, with pandemic problem with dieting in the United States.
Well, the problem with all of these foods is that they're so calorie dense, and that's what you talked about, where people are used to eating a smaller amount of food, and the stomach doesn't need to be that big to accommodate the smaller amount of food that's very calorically dense.
Right,
Okay. But
right,
once you switch, I mean, this is one of the great things about eating fruits and vegetables is, I mean, they're so calorie light. I mean, you can eat I mean, you can eat bananas and lettuce all day. You will never gain weight. And
I
on
know.
top of that, you have so much energy. You're never going to lead a sedentary lifestyle when you have a fruit-based diet. Never.
You know, that's what I've told people. I was telling my sister that. I said, you cannot gain weight on this diet. And they look at me like I'm from another planet. They don't understand what I'm saying. And now I will say I have interviewed a few folks who claim that when they totally ate indiscriminately, and even while they were exercising, they were able to gain weight on a raw food diet. So I think there is a limit somewhere, and your caloric intake will eventually start to add weight. I know that Durian Ryder and Freely's experience have said that that's not the case, and they have this long-term position that if you stay on this long-term, you will eventually kind of get real svelte. But I do think there are some cases of folks, and there could be a lot of mitigating circumstances why they had the experiences they did. Nevertheless, it seems like there is a fundamental principle of caloric intake and amount of calories burned in physical activity. There has to be some kind of mathematical relationship there. So
Yeah, I mean, I can't speak for everyone else. I mean, for me, I'm wondering how many, somebody who would gain weight on the vegan diet, I kind of would be wondering how much fat they're consuming. Are they eating a lot of nuts?
right.
Um, but I just cannot. I mean, even me, I'm really thin. I'm eating all day, just so you know. I don't. I mean, a big problem I have. I haven't gotten to eating those huge meals. I just that's just not the way I eat. I usually eat 5 or 6 meals a day.
Yeah.
I eat all day, however much I want to eat, whenever I want to eat, and
Well,
I never gain any weight.
that's great. That's great. Although I do think on a 2,000 calorie diet, it would be hard for you to gain weight. But
Yeah.
I think an interesting experiment might be for you, if it doesn't make you too uncomfortable, just force yourself to eat 3,000 calories for like 2 or 3 weeks,
Yeah.
and see if there's anything that happens.
I know when I do eat more, I won't gain weight, but I will have more energy. I think when you're going 2,000 calories, you're pretty mellow.
Yeah.
I know if I ever want to do a big run, I usually will pack in some dates. I'll eat maybe 10 dates just to get revved up and
Right.
you know.
Well, it's cool. It kind of sounds like you're happy with where you're at. I mean, that's the main thing.
Yeah, but it's an endless. I think for everyone, it's an endless process. You're always working on different things, and there's always some other step you can take. Like even people that are eating all fruit-based diet. Well, the next question is, are you eating kind of the denser fruits like bananas and dates? Well, that's not really the best. The best is water-rich fruits.
Right,
So
right.
there's always some other step, another person that's further out.
Right, 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 right. Well, that's another issue too. So one of the things that motivates me, it's not just a health thing. There are these ethical and ecological concerns, and
Yeah.
if you're trying to communicate this to a broader public, what's more important that I mean, I'm glad to hear about folks who do well on watermelons and mangoes, and that's all they want, and that's wonderful. Uh, but in terms of getting this message to a broader public, I think it's important to make it as accessible as possible.
Yeah, that's why the whole raw food thing, I mean, it's kind of esoteric, but it really is not nearly as important as the question of being a vegan or not being a vegan. For me, I mean, I want to have the optimum health possible, but really the only thing that matters, the only thing that's really substantial in all of these discussions is the question of the violence that's done to animals and the destruction that's done to our environment. And if you just go vegan, if you're eating a junk food vegan diet, so be it. As long as you do those things, you've already made this huge ethical step where you're not taking part in the horrendous activities that we're doing to the environment and to farm animals. And
I love what you're saying, Barry, and it's a huge point, and it reminds me of something I've been thinking about. I want to do a video on, and it's the creation of this term plant-based, and why did that name come up? And you'll hear some of the respected doctors, I think Campbell and maybe Esselstyn, I think maybe it's Campbell. They don't want to be labeled vegan,
right.
and it's really interesting to me. I applaud vegans who 50, 60 years ago said, I don't want to kill animals anymore. And that's a valuable argument to me. In fact, I mean, the health argument is more of a selfish argument. I mean,
Yeah.
except in terms of the cost to society. In terms of the cost to society, health is a social issue. Um, but the ethics of it is a selfless thing. It's like you don't want to see innocent creatures killed for no reason. And I
Yeah.
think that's a valuable and a worthwhile reason, a worthy reason to embark on this. But if people want to do it just for health reasons, and if the message is more acceptable for people on a health platform, I respect that. But I applaud vegans, and I'm not afraid to use the term vegan. And I think plant-based is fine too, but I think it's all good.
Well, when I first came onto this diet, it was for purely health reasons. Okay. And I
Yeah.
have an enormous respect for people who come to this diet purely for the ethical reasons. Okay, I mean, I think that's great. But one thing I tell people, I don't do a lot of preaching of this, but one thing I'll tell people is when you switch the diet, when you switch your diet to stop eating meat, um, it's it's a spiritual transformation that you undergo because after you make the change, like I'm talking about people who are just thinking of health reasons and people who make the change because of ethical reasons, they're already aware of all this.
Right.
But for people who make the change because of health reasons, you undergo a transformation where suddenly you realize, hey, you know what? There's all these terrible things happening to farm animals, and it's wrong. What's happening? It's evil, what we're doing to farm animals.
Right.
And for me, it was just like, hey, I did actually watch that movie Farm Inc. And at the time, I did think it was wrong what we were doing. And, now I'm actually doing something about it. And it changes you spiritually. It takes a burden off because what's happening with people now is everyone knows that animals are being slaughtered to provide for this meat that they're eating. They just choose not to think about it.
Exactly.
They just say, you know what? I don't care. I'm not going to think about it. I have to eat meat. That's the normal thing to do.
Right.
But then once they make this change, they realize, hey, it's not normal. It's not right. It's wrong. And I need to tell other people that it's wrong. And it really should stop.
Yeah, I so hear you. And so then you're facing the dilemma, which maybe you can talk a little bit about. It's like, how has this affected your relationships with your immediate family and in the broader society as you kind of navigate, when is it appropriate to discuss this? Who can I influence? How much can I invest in this? How aggressive should I be about that?
Yeah. So I'm married and I have 2 children, and my family has they've made a lot of changes. We don't eat they don't eat chicken or beef. They still do eat seafood, and they still sometimes eat dairy, but they've gotten a lot better. But it's a struggle.
Yeah.
I don't want to tell them how to live their life, but they do know it's healthier to follow this lifestyle. When it comes to other people, unfortunately, you can never push the issue with other people because of one key reason. The person has to be ready to make a change. And if they're not ready to make a change, you can make a perfectly logical argument to them,
Right.
and it will not matter. Okay? But on the flip side, if they are ready, they're going to let you know that they're open, and they're going to say in so many words, I'm receptive to what you're doing. And you have to be prepared at that point with some kind of a crafted message that's not too confrontational and it's not too intense, but something that basically says, hey, I'm really healthy on this diet. This diet is working for me, and it will work for you.
Exactly. I love that. Yeah, that's beautiful. Let me ask you about a couple of nutrients, if that's cool, and just tell me what conclusions you've reached personally about them. The first being B12, and I'll let you know. I probably should have said this earlier. You will. I know you're seeing me up in the corner, and you're looking at me there, but people are seeing you through your camera.
Oh, sorry.
That's all right. It just occurred to me, but
okay.
But anyway, what's your take on B12?
I do take supplemental B12 occasionally. I have not gotten tested.
Yep.
I just, I have a garden. I eat a lot of food right from my garden, in the spring and summer.
Yeah.
I'm just not totally convinced that our diet is going to be so dramatic. Our bodies are going to be so dramatically affected by B12. I mean, Dr. Graham thinks you can get B12 just from a natural fruit-based diet. I know a lot of people get shots for B12. I have never done that. I I'm not. I have not gotten tested, so I probably shouldn't comment any further than that.
All right, all right. And how about vitamin D?
So vitamin D, I go to tanning salons. I think you have to get as much vitamin D as possible in the summer. I'm outside as much as possible. I think, if you're getting sun, if you're getting adequate vitamin D, it has so many health implications, positive health implications. And we have a vitamin D deficiency epidemic in this country. 90% of the people in this country are deficient. People, when they go outside, they'll use suntan lotion. Nobody goes to a tanning salon in the summer, I mean in the winter. People who do generally don't go to the right kind of tanning bed. You have to go to one that has UVB. Most of them have UVA only. So I think most people are really deficient in vitamin D, but you have to get as much as possible. Okay. I mean, it's just, you have to think, the whole thing with 80-10-10 is just the natural, how did we evolve?
Yeah.
And the way we evolved was we were out in the jungle and we were getting bombarded with solar radiation. All this energy was coming down and hitting our body, right? And the most efficient life is going to be the most successful. And so we're getting bombarded by these UVB rays,
right?
And it's just natural that our body will do something with them. That's efficient. To have a lot of energy coming onto your body and do nothing with it, it doesn't make sense. So that's the way we evolved. And now we live in an indoor environment where we don't get any solar radiation at all, but our body still needs it to do like everything that it does. I mean, vitamin D has like thousands of different uses in our body. And so it's just another one of these things that's kind of contributing to the terrible health situation in our country.
Yeah, that's great points, Barry. Great points. The last nutrient I usually ask about is iodine. Have you looked into that at all? Are you concerned at all about that?
No,
Okay.
I don't know enough to say.
Okay. And are there any nutrients that I have not named that you think require special attention?
Not really. I mean, I think if you're eating a healthy diet, in this country, there's all these marketing things, and people say, "Oh man, you must be deficient in vitamin B6, or you're deficient in vitamin K2, so you got to take a supplement for K2."
Yeah.
I mean, it seems like marketing to me, and I think people think about things a little bit too much, and they complicate things. And I think if you're eating the diet that human beings evolved eating, as close as possible. I mean, the diet that we evolved eating really no longer exists because all the fruits that that we buy now are kind of manipulated so that they can be shipped and sold that way. But
Right.
If you eat the most natural diet possible, I just think you're going to get all the vitamins and nutrients and everything that your body needs.
There was something I meant to ask you earlier, and it came back to me. And it's when we were talking about going from cooked vegan to raw vegan, which is essentially, moving away from grains and starches and going more fruit-based. And one of the implications of that on a broad scale would be you would have more orchard production than you would have fields of grain.
Yeah.
And I wonder if you have you read anything on that? I think that's one of the pluses of
that is a great point. And I did read something about it once, and it was someone in New Jersey, and he wanted to build a kind of sustainable orchard in which he would have a lot of different kinds of fruit trees and a lot of different kinds of nut trees.
Mm-hmm.
And I think people talk a lot about the erosion of topsoil in this country, the idea that it's very, growing grains is very destructive to farmland. It's not really sustainable.
Mm-hmm.
the flip side of that is that orchards are just incredibly sustainable. They're things that just last forever.
Yeah.
And the idea, I mean, it just seems. I mean, this past year I planted 5 apple trees in my backyard. So,
All right. All
oh,
right.
hopefully I'll get some apple trees. But it's so low maintenance. It's just easy, and it's very. It's not so destructive to the topsoil.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, that's a huge point. Grant Campbell made a comment. He said it's three-dimensional production. Three-dimensional production. So, grain is in a sense two-dimensional. You only got one level, but on a fruit tree, you've got these many different levels.
Yeah.
I don't know how that bears out, per bushel or whatever, but I'm sure it's pretty high. I know that both grains and fruit orchards both are tremendously better ways to produce food than raising animals for food.
Yeah, for sure. And hopefully people will eat more fruit, and then we'll have more orchards and just all the positive benefits that come from that.
Absolutely. I can't remember if I've forgotten anything. Were there some other topics you wanted to talk about? I've kept you for about an hour. I appreciate all the time.
Yeah, it's been a great discussion. I think we covered a lot of things.
Yeah, it was fun. Let's see. We did ethics and ecology and.
You mentioned, well, I mean, something you mentioned Jainism in one of your videos. And when you first talked to me, I kind of went through your channel and watched I watched your interview with the D-Man, somebody who I think is great.
He's awesome. Awesome.
And I watched a couple other ones. I know in one of them you mentioned something about Jainism, and I'm like, what is this guy talking about? And I actually, did a little bit of studying and did some reading on it. Jainism is an amazing religion.
Yes. Yes.
It's incredible. And I have some notes here. I wanted to just tell you the main 5 tenets of Jainism.
Okay.
Are number 1, nonviolence, which I think all vegans. I mean, the vegan diet is basically a nonviolent diet.
Yes.
And Jainists are all expected to be vegans.
Yes.
There's some religions like Seventh-day Adventists are very kind of pro-vegan lifestyle, but
yeah, vegetarian. Yeah.
Not that many Seventh-day Adventists are actually vegetarian. But that's, if you know anything about Loma Linda, California, and all the people that live to 100 out there, it's a Seventh-day Adventist community. But the first thing about Jainism is they're into nonviolence, truthfulness, non-theft, celibacy, and non-possession. They don't want to have any possessions. So
celibacy, that's interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, yeah, that's
a toughie.
That's a tough one. But those are the kind of 5 tenets of the religion. It's a pretty interesting religion. I think, I'm Christian, but I do like to spend some time. I have made videos on a bunch of quotes of Gandhi, and Gandhi studied Jainism as well as Hinduism and Christianity and Islam. He studied all these religions and kind of incorporated all qualities of all these different religions into his own philosophy.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of overlap between Jainism and Hinduism. One of the interesting characteristics about Jainism in terms of veganism, as you said, is this. They kind of took non-violence to the nth degree, and if you've ever seen some old films, I don't know if you still do in India, but you used to occasionally see Jains walking the streets, and they'd have these masks on, which would prevent bugs from flying into their mouths, and they would walk very slowly so they wouldn't step on bugs. I mean, that was how extreme the nonviolence principle, manifested. Now, I've met modern-day Jains. They're not that extreme, and I've met Jains that they do marry, so they're not. I don't know how the celibacy works out in their belief system, but I've met Jains that are married and have children.
Yeah.
So, yeah. But yeah, it's a fascinating religion. Fascinating.
Yeah. And I think that the thing they wear over their mouth is also to remind them not to say any cruel words or,
Ah,
angry, speak in anger or, say
control the
anything.
tongue.
Yeah,
Control the
because,
tongue.
the idea is, violence isn't just killing things. It's, whenever you kind of impose your will on someone, in a way, you're committing some form of violence against that other person.
Ah, that's very interesting. I love what you're
Yeah.
saying there, because I think our culture, American culture, could really stand to examine that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think people should at least spend a little time. And I've tried to make videos. I'm going to make a video on Jainism. And I've tried to make some videos on some of the ideas that Gandhi had. And, I think, our culture, it's a very violent culture. I don't know how else to put it.
Yeah,
Um, and I
yeah.
think a little bit of just a realization that other societies are trying to live a more nonviolent lifestyle is beneficial. I mean, it
Yeah,
helps to think of that. Think of that.
I love what you're saying. I think it's complicated. I think one of the things that happened in the United States is for so long we had so much space, it's so much open space that it lent itself to this kind of strong independent streak. And that can sometimes be almost a little bit antisocial, you know. I mean, it certainly led to self-sufficiency, which is great. Um, but sometimes if you think you can do everything on your own, you kind of want to do everything on your own, and you don't really want to be restricted in any way by anyone else. You know that there's a, but society implies that you're sharing space here with other people. You know, and
Yeah.
your actions have effects on other people, and their actions have effects on you. Um,
One thing I was, really cognizant of when I first switched to the vegan diet was I really felt when I first changed my diet that there was much more calmness to my personality. I just think there's more of an evenness to your consciousness when you switch to the vegan diet. And I think eating meat, eating dairy, you're putting a lot of hormones into your body. Um, it's a different chemistry to your body altogether.
yes.
And I think that affects people. It makes them more agitated, more excitable, easier to fly off the hook, easier to do acts of violence, whether it's just from losing your temper or whatever. Where when you switch to the vegan diet, it's just easier to be mellow. That's
Well,
my interpretation.
you know, I love what you're saying, and I've had other people say that they experienced that personally. So that's some evidence. I had always read this like in yoga books, and their idea was in a very kind of unscientific way was that if you're eating animals, you will be more likely to express animalistic tendencies. And on a very I don't know, a very gross level, that seems to make sense. If you are what you eat. If you're eating an animal, you're likely to be expressing yourself in more animalistic ways. Um, but what you're saying is even a little more scientific, and it makes sense. When an animal is killed, these hormones of fear are released into the bloodstream. That stuff is in the meat when you're eating it. So not only do you have these hormones that these animals are raised on, you got the fear and anxiety that the animal experiences at the moment of death, and then the horrific, I mean the years that they spend in these horrific conditions, that's all negative hormone stuff. And
Right.
then, of course, the negative effects of excessive protein and fat. It's
Yeah.
really kind of a nasty stew to be consuming.
Yeah, it's I don't know. I mean, when you see the full issue, when you see the issue clearly, I don't know how people do it. I don't know
Yeah,
how.
and I like what you're alluding to here. I think there's a lot could be said on this. It seems like most religions have addressed some of their scriptures and texts to diet and food, and why is that? And there's some real interesting ways to think about this when you look at, when the Garden of Eden and falling from the Garden of Eden and what happened after we fell. Well, before we fell, we ate what the earth produced. After we fell, we had to do all these special procedures to make meat suitable for consumption. Why is that? Why
Right.
does meat require all this special preparation? Because it's really not suitable for consumption.
Right. Right.
And the eating of meat is associated with the fall. In other words, all of these kinds of illness arose after the fall when we began eating meat.
Yeah. And
Uh,
I mean, as I said, I'm Christian, and I don't think, unfortunately, I don't think Christianity really deals with the question of is it right or is it wrong to kill an animal for food, where Jainism is very explicit. It's wrong.
yeah,
Doing anything, any violent act is wrong.
yeah,
For first of all, because you're committing violence on this other creature, and Jainism is very specific. They always say other living beings, so anything living. Where with Christianity, it's all about human beings. Like, human beings are in the image of God, and they are at one level, and every other creature is something lower.
yes,
And when you think of everything else as something lower, it's easier to say, they're just here to serve you, to serve your needs. But Jainism is very good at saying, hey, everything is God's creation. These are living beings, and it's wrong to do any violence to them. And they do. Jainism is kind of takes it just one little step further, where when you commit violence against another creature, not only is it bad for that other creature, but it's bad for you. When you're committing acts of violence, it's not good for you.
yeah.
You're going to be much better off living a nonviolent lifestyle.
Right, right, and that becomes really something to consider if you think there's a possibility that reincarnation is true, because every time you commit that action, whether personally or indirectly by buying a package of meat at the store, you're accruing negative karma.
Yeah.
Now, granted, there may be atheists and people who don't believe in karma, or Christians. That's fine. I'm just saying, if you do believe in karma and you're killing animals, you're accruing some negative karma from that.
Yeah. Yep. And even if you were atheist, I would say, living a non-violent lifestyle, it's very beneficial for you in this life, right here and now. There's a lot of positives that you get from living your life that way.
Well, I think that's a great point, Barry. And you're reminding me, there's these studies that have shown that folks that have to work in these abattoirs, these slaughterhouses.
Yeah, I saw that video. Yeah.
Yeah, the folks who work in these slaughterhouses, they get a lot of injuries, and they're really, a lot of them suffer from a lot of depression.
It's really, I mean, it's really terrible that people would kind of delegate this dirty act to a certain set of unfortunate people. It's really unfortunate. I mean, I would have much more respect for someone who ate meat, and famously the guy who Mark Zuckerberg, the head of the guy who started Facebook's, made a resolution one year where he was going to kill everything that he ate. And I don't respect anyone who eats meat, but at least he killed the rabbits that he was going to eat for dinner. Most people just delegate it to these poor souls that get stuck working in the slaughterhouse. And a typical job in a slaughterhouse, I'll just give you an example. A typical job would be, it's your job to cut the head off a cow, take the head and put it, from here to there, and to do that hundreds and hundreds of times a day. And that's going to affect you. You're not going to be the same person when for a whole day you're just cutting the head off a cow.
Yeah.
But when you're a meat eater, you're paying that person to do that.
That's right.
He's your agent. He's working for you.
That's right.
And, that's terrible.
Yeah.
And so not only are the jobs disgusting that these people do, but it turns them, if you've seen any films about the conditions of farm animals, the handlers are vicious.
Yes. Yeah.
they're vicious and they're so cruel.
Yeah.
And I don't think those people by nature are vicious, but I think when you put them into that environment where they have to go and chop up a cow every day, it just turns them into more violent people.
Yes. Exactly. Exactly.
So,
Beautifully said, Barry. Beautifully stated. Yeah.
so it's a dirty business, and I really hope people realize it. And, there's movies out there like Earthlings and Farm Inc. Hopefully people will see that and reconsider their actions.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, Barry, it's a real pleasure. I'm so glad I got to talk to you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
thanks for contacting me.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's been
And
great.
good luck with your channel, and I'll
Yeah.
put that on here. And are there any other websites you'd like to recommend? Any other websites of yours that have different names?
Well, I would, I don't have any my own website. A couple that I would mention. There's one called adapt.org, which is ADA, I think TT.org.
Yeah, ADAPTT. Yeah, yep.
That's one I would recommend for the violence against animals. And the other one I would recommend would be this website by Brother Stendhal Rast called gratefulness.org.
Ah,
And they're just two websites that are gratefulness.org is a fantastic website.
I've never seen that. That sounds great. I'd like to see that. Yeah.
Yeah, I love both of them.
All right.
Thanks a
Well,
lot. Hey, good
yeah,
luck with your channel. I think you've got some great interviews and you've gotten some great people to do interviews with. And I wish you the best of luck.
thank you, and you too, Barry. Good luck with all you do.
Thanks.
All right. Take care.
Bye.